Dermatologist. A doctor who treats skin, hair, or nail problems. For example, she went to a dermatologist for acne. General physician. A doctor for common illness like cold, fever, or headache. For example, I felt dizzy and weak, so I went to a general physician. Neurologist. A doctor for brain, nerves, or spinal problems. For example, she went to a neurologist after having frequent headaches. Oncologist. A doctor who treats cancer. For example, my uncle started treatment under an oncologist care. Dietitian. A doctor who gives advice on food and nutrition. For example, she visited a dietitian to plan a healthy diet. Podiatrist. A doctor for foot and ankle problems. For example, she visited a podiatrist for a foot injury. Immunologist. A doctor for weak immunity or allergies. For example, my friend visited an immunologist for frequent infections. Pathologist. A doctor who studies lab tests like blood or urine to find diseases. For example, her blood report was analyzed by a pathologist. Gastroenterologist. A doctor for stomach, liver, or digestion problems. For example, he went to a gastroenterologist after severe stomach pain. Ophthalmologist. A doctor for eye problems or vision issues. For example, I had trouble reading small letters, so I went to an ophthalmologist. Psychiatrist. A doctor for mental health, stress, depression, or anxiety. For example, she was feeling depressed and sad, so she visited a psychiatrist. Audiologist. A doctor for hearing problems. For example, the patient met an audiologist because they could not hear clearly. Hepatologist. A doctor who treats liver problems. For example, people with liver pain often consult a hepatologist. Orthodontist. A doctor or specialist who fixes crooked teeth. For example, the child visited an orthodontist to wear braces. Endocrinologist. A doctor for hormone problems like diabetes or thyroid. For example, people with thyroid issues see an endocrinologist regularly. Radiologist, a doctor who studies X ray, CT scan, and MRI reports. For example, the radiologist checked my uncle's chest X ray. Pulmonologist, a doctor for lungs and breathing problems. For example, he visited a pulmonologist because of asthma attacks. Urologist, a specialist for urine and kidney problems. For example, he went to a urologist for urine pain. Veterinarian, a specialist for sick animals. For example, the dog was taken to a veterinarian. Rheumatologist, a specialist for joint pain and stiffness. For example, she visited a rheumatologist for knee pain. Optometrist, a specialist who checks eyesight. For example, he visited an optometrist for an eye test. Dentist, a specialist for teeth problems. For example, she went to a dentist for tooth pain. Neurosurgeon, a specialist who performs brain surgery. For example, the patient was treated by a neurosurgeon. Speech therapist, a specialist who helps with speaking problems. For example, the boy attends a speech therapist. Pediatrician, a doctor for babies and children's health. For example, my little cousin had a fever, so we took him to a pediatrician. Keep learning, keep practicing. Thank you for watching.